program. This is definitely an episode you will want to share with your friends and family. Today, we will be learning about the power of words by our very special guest and publishing expert, Miss Tammy Kling. Tammy's books have been featured on Dateline, the Discovery Channel, Oprah Radio, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the list goes on and on with many other major media outlets. Please help me give a warm welcome to Miss Tammy Kling. Welcome, Tammy.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It is so good to have you here today with us. And you've got a vast bio, Tammy, but could you just take a minute and share a little bit more about your personal and professional background with our viewers?
Sure. Well, that's a big question, but I would say that my personal and professional background, if I had to sum it up, is that I really help people tell their story, and I started out as a journalism major, and I started out writing and journaling from a very young age, from the age of 7, and then as I continued journaling, some of those journals turned into books, and I've written several books, but then people would come to me and say, hey, can you help me write my book? And I found that even people that are quiet or leaders or CEOs, some people have the most amazing personal stories. Mm-hmm. And I love helping world changers share their story. So that's really my mission, is to help world changers share their story. I don't actually buy into that myth that everyone says, well, everyone has a story, because I don't really want to help Ted Bundy or a serial killer tell their story. And so, sure, we all have a story, but as far as a book goes, intellectual property out in the world, I really want to use words to save lives and change lives.
That's great. Mm-hmm. That is wonderful, and you've been doing a great job at that. Well, Tammy, when I have guests on the program that are Christians, I always like to ask them, how did they come to surrender their hearts and lives to the Lord Jesus Christ? Could you share a little bit about that?
Wow, yes. Okay, so I was an atheist my whole life, raised an atheist, and I still am a very scientific thinker, but just raised, just really around agnostic, atheist kind of, I just really wasn't presented a different way. When I went through a few things in my life that were powerful, I started seeing that, wow, there had to be more than just what I saw in front of me. Mm-hmm. I started having some experiences, encounters with people, and I worked in an airplane crash in the jungle. So my prior life, before I was an author, I worked in crisis management. So I was in Colombia, and I was in the jungle at this airplane crash, and I had there were only 4 survivors. And when you have that crossroads moment where people touch your heart starts opening a little, whereas from my childhood, I had developed a very hardened heart, And not only hardened, but I was kind of like a gang member inside. I was angry at everybody, didn't like anything that resembled good. And so by the time I got to Texas, God, I always say, God just started working on my heart kind of behind the scenes. And I had a couple of really supernatural experiences. And one day, just a stranger, he put his hand on my head. It was actually T.D. Jakes. I had a girlfriend trick me, and she said, hey, do you want to go to a singles night? And I said, sure. I was single, and I was kind of lost. And she said, follow me. I said, where is it? And she said, it's a place called the Potter's House. So I said, what is that? And so she said, don't worry about it. There's going to be lots of single guys there. So I followed her, and I drove, and ended up going to this big place. I still had no clue what it was. And they start talking, and I'm with a bunch of single people that looked like me, acted like me. And so he put his hand on my head, and it's like I had some sort of blackout or out-of-body experience. He started praying for me. Never had anybody do that in my life, touch me and pray over me. And the next day, it's like I had a completely new heart.
Wow.
I mean, like a completely new heart.
Wow,
Whereas
praise God.
the week before, I was making fun of Christians, making fun of the word religion, which for me, it's not about religion at all. It's about a personal relationship and just knowing that I don't have to follow this direction or this direction or this direction, and I can still be me. And one of the things that was amazing is I called my whole family the next day, and my mom didn't talk to me for a year. I never say that on camera ever because I'm always afraid she's going to be watching. But at this point, she's still not talking to me. So I say, my mom didn't talk to me for a year. And when you stand firm in whatever you believe in, I mean, that's going to happen. That's going to happen. But my whole life changed. I went from depressed, suicidal, circumstantial happiness, like I was always situationally happy. If I was in a good relationship, I was happy. If that relationship ended, I was unhappy. If I had a good job, I was happy. But now I really have peace and joy that I hope I can pass down to my kids, where they know, you know what? Romans 12:2, do not be a conformist. Do not conform to the world. I mean, I was kind of shocked when when I found out that like less than 10% of the world is Christian. And if you look at all the ways that people persecute them, I mean, it's amazing because I see, if you show your faith, immediately you're persecuted. And, the boys, my little boys, I have 2 little boys now that I'm raising as first generation believers. So it's exciting to me to have a family that's, agnostic, atheist, and for me to say, you know what, I believe in God.
Amen.
So,
praise God. I love that. I love that, and I love the Potter's House and T.D. Jakes.
He's great,
and they are very serious about the Word and about worship. And I can just imagine you coming in to that atmosphere. Because me as a believer, when I have gone into that atmosphere, I have received really wonderful things from the Lord, and it's been life transforming as well.
Well,
so.
And it was interesting for me because as, it's a very dominantly African American environment. So it's kind of like I probably would not have received from a different environment. And, I think to have that diversity and that difference put me in this uncomfortable area where, I could be around. And today, like I'm comfortable with atheists and gang members, and I'm comfortable in that environment and going in and talking to them because I was there.
Right.
And I think that's the interesting thing about God is you don't need any human really to try to talk to you because God will do that for you and change your heart. So.
And we're just to be witnesses, and you're being a witness. But I do want to encourage your mother to give you a call. You're missing out on a great blessing. So,
Mom, you got my number.
We're going to pray you watch this show and call
That'd
Tammy.
be great.
And so that would be awesome. Well, now, Tammy, let's switch gears a little bit. You say that words are currency. What do you mean by that phrase?
Well, I think that, words have power to build and power to destroy. And so just like, getting serious about that example, a lot of people will watch and say, well, why doesn't she call her mother? Why doesn't she reach out? And I think you can extend words to people and sometimes they're not received, or sometimes people say damaging things to you. And then you have to really not let it internalize so much that you tell yourself that you're something you're not. Because words are currency and they're an investment in a relationship, right? Whether it's your child, whether it's your spouse. But the words that you say to yourself, sometimes we don't even recognize. And it wasn't really until I did a TED Talk about 1.5 years ago, and they titled it Words Save Lives, because my father had committed suicide when I was 7. And I always think about what if I had just, I go back to that little girl. What if I could sit with him face to face? What if I could say, Dad, just hang on another day. It's going to be okay. And I've had that opportunity to sit face to face with that man, not my father, but a man just like him over and over and over again, men and women. And I know that words save lives. But if you don't step out there and use your words, then you'll never know. So a lot of people are afraid and they don't know what to say to people. And when we work with the homeless, I encourage people, don't think about trying to give them food or a pizza or gloves or socks. Those things are all what they'll ask for, but give them words. You know, tell them, you know what, you matter. Your story matters. You know, there's a gift inside you. They don't believe that. And a lot of people, even people in mansions, are homeless in their heart.
Good point. Yes, that's right. Good point. Well, that's awesome, Tammy. I love that. Now, I know you've authored many books. Could you share just a couple and what they're about with us?
Sure. Well, my most recent is called Words, and it's about the power of words, and it's about how you can just be intentional about things that you want to say to other people. And I still use that every day. Sometimes I catch myself, you know, when I'm getting on the kids, you know, do this, clean the house, do this. And then I catch myself and I say, wait a minute, do I want those words to be what I'm remembered for, right? So I have one called Words. I have a book called The Compass, and that's an amazing book, really, that I don't feel like I had any part of. It was just downloaded into my brain, you know, it's just a divine download. And then I've got two coming out this year, Supernatural and Freedom. So
what will Supernatural be about?
Supernatural, you'll have to read it. It's about really harnessing the things that you cannot see. It's about supernatural gifts and really understanding what your personal supernatural gifts are. And then it also disputes some of the myths of what people think are supernatural gifts. Because in the supernatural realm, we all know there's things you can't see, but a lot of people get confused about what is that? You know, what is this and that? And so it's all truth about truth. So you'll be the first one to have a copy, and we'll do another show on that.
Hey, that sounds great. That sounds great. That's wonderful. Well, now, I think we've talked a little bit about this. You help other people tell their stories. Just tell us some of the ways that you help them tell their stories.
Okay. Well, you know, you have books and you are a good communicator because you know your calling. A lot of times people come to me and it might be an athlete, a football player, a CEO, or a housewife, or anyone, and they have a story inside them that they want to write about. My gifting is really connecting the dots. A lot of times people come and say, a football player will say, I want to write a book about leadership because I want to encourage my sons or young athletes to not follow down this path of drugs, but I want them to be leaders. And maybe it's because they went down that path. But then as we're talking, there's maybe some sort of deeper message that comes out. So I coach them through that process of not just writing a book or doing a show or building a brand, but actually getting laser focused on what is your calling, and let's bring that out to the world. Because let's say we have 3 careers or 1 career, you know, you can still have a book, be a speaker, and build a legacy. And it's about your legacy and not just building your life. And so that's what I'm really equipping world changers to do.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome, because there are so many of us that wear so many hats, and we're wondering, how are we making this all work? How is it connecting, you know, but you still feel like you're supposed to be doing that.
And I say, you know, sometimes those things make money and sometimes they don't make money, but still you can wear those many hats as long as you're laser focused on your calling. So when people start getting confused, like yesterday, I spoke with someone who wants to write a book, but they're not passionate about that topic. But that's their career where they could make money, and then they want to write this other book. And I said, well, look at your 5 to 10 year plan as a legacy. So let's tackle the topic that is burning in your soul, even if it's about autism or a story that happened where maybe you were abused as a child. Sometimes people are sexually or emotionally abused, and they really want to write about that, but they're a leader at a company. So I say, well, let's write a story about this. Even if it's fiction, let's do that to get it out of your soul. And then that's going to be meaningful. Maybe they start a program for young girls that were abused. You know, so it all ties together when you look at your life as a legacy, instead of like, I went down this trail and I had a failure here. I went down this and I was a success. You know, it's all your legacy. Like what you do. You have many different things that you do, but ultimately if anyone looked at your Facebook profile or your show, they would know, you know, Theresa uses words and she inspires. And they would know that. So
thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, you also are a motivational speaker nationally and internationally. So tell us a little bit about your speaking presentations.
Well, I love to tell speakers this is I never prepare. So what I do is I take a shower and then I'll just say, because I was stressing actually last week about a speaking engagement. I was stressing and I was in California and I'm going to get up on stage and talk to doctors. And it was the first time I had talked to physical therapists, doctors, healthcare industry. And I'm stressing about the presentation. I thought, wait a minute, I'm just going to do what I always do. I took a shower and I said, God, just give me the right words. That's it. Like, that sounds crazy, right? But when I got on stage, it was just like the best talk I ever gave. And I talked about legacy. Everything that we're talking about here is, it's not about what do I do next year to make income? What do I do in 5 years? You know, what's going to happen 10 years down the road? How are we going to make all the ends meet? It's not about that. It's about, what's your legacy? And most people think that it's about their kids. If you ask someone, what's your legacy, they'll say, it's my kids. And I say, your legacy, your responsibility might be your kids, but your legacy is really who am I and what mark am I going to leave behind on the world? So if you wrote a book and 200 years from now someone's reading it, what's that legacy and those lessons that you leave behind? So when I go on stage, whether it's in London speaking to kids or whether it's speaking to a business audience or on TV, it's always really authentically about, what am I supposed to deliver on that day? So I never have a pre-planned message. Although when I coach speakers, I always say, have 3 things, have 3 core messages that you can talk about. But for me, I always like to say, you know, that audience on that day, what do they need to hear? Yeah.
Well, now that is truly walking out the New Testament, what you're saying there, because the Scripture says the Holy Spirit will fill your mouth, and that's what you are living out. And so I'm very impressed with that, Miss Tammy.
Well, the reason I think that's important also is, even when I go to a church, for instance, and there's like an 8-week sermon planned, you know, and I know that it's an 8-week series, I get a little, honestly, I gotta say, I get a little frustrated because I don't want some pre-planned message, you know. I love it when somebody stands up and says, hey, I'm supposed to deliver this word to you today. However, for our lives, you do have to have a plan. You do have to have a message. It's good to be intentional, but if I'm going somewhere, and I encourage speakers and authors in the same way, if I'm going somewhere to speak, or even if I'm going to counsel my children, I will say, what is it that the Holy Spirit wants me to deliver? What is it today that, instead of just kind of going my own way, you know?
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that, and that's so fruitful when it's like that. I believe the same way. Have a plan, be prepared, but allow the Lord to lead. So I love
and if
that.
you don't mind me say one more thing, do we have time to say one thing
I do
on
want to
this?
move on to something really important, but go right ahead.
Okay, to wrap up that thought, here's the concept that I would say to my non-believer friends, is that the difference is, it's not about religion. It's not about, you know, and luckily I know nothing about religion. I don't know anything about Catholics, Methodists, nothing, and I don't want to know. I don't want to know anything, because all I know is that my father, right, who shot himself because he was at a depressed moment. Now, there's depression, there's sadness, there's anger, and there's just handling things in a bad way, right? So I know a lot of people who've been at such a destructive moment in their lives where they didn't want to live anymore. And you can't label it mental illness or depression, because it might just be a 17-year-old who broke up with his girlfriend, okay? But at that point, I don't want my kids to believe that they have all the answers, because there comes a point in everyone's life where you have no more answers, where no scientist, no parent, maybe your parents turn against you, maybe you go do things, you know, maybe you're sitting in a jail cell and you're a kid, or you broke up with your girlfriend. there comes a point in time when you have no answers. And I used to believe the New Age movement that said the answers are all within you, because I'm pretty smart, you know, I've got a high IQ, so I loved that. The answers are all within you. But then I reached a moment in my life where I realized I don't have all the answers.
Right.
And I wanted to take the same route my dad did. And so, you know, that's why I really feel that it's not about religion. It's really important to say that that word scares people, that it's about a relationship with God.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when we have that experience with God and He dwells within us, then you could say the answers are in us because God is in us and He's the one with the answers.
There you go. Now,
and
I like that. I like that.
That's the only
Yeah.
way I will ever accept that. I won't
like that.
accept the New Age, but I can see it biblically like that.
I like that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
good.
Well, now, Tammy, I know you have so many activities, but we've really got to talk about this really special activity that you do. You have a remarkable and profound way how you help the homeless. And you're doing some wonderful things with them. So tell us all about that.
Well, we would love you to come on location and do a show one time with us.
That'd be nice.
But we have two things that we do. One is a words campaign where we deliver words to the homeless. So we actually go down where they are on the street and we have 3x5 cards, and the cards have a sentence on them, okay? So a lot of times the homeless, they're our friends. We employ homeless writers, right? So we know them and we know what they like and what they don't like. And they'll tell you, hey, I can get a meal 5 times a day if I want to. I can get a meal at any shelter. I can get a jacket. I can get clothing. But what they don't have are words to get them out of their situation. And homelessness is very often only about a mortal wound, what I call a mortal wound that they can't get out of. Usually it's something about rejection or abandonment by a parent, and then they stay stuck in homelessness. And it's words that we've had success changing lives. So we deliver these word cards, and we don't try to preach to them. We don't try to give them clothes or pizza because that's temporary. A pizza will last a day. You know, I don't know how many of us have seen that video where a guy gives a homeless guy a pizza and he's shocked because the homeless guy gives it away. Well, it's a beautiful theory, but why is that shocking? I mean, some of the most amazing people I've met are homeless, and they change your life too. So for me, it's just giving them words because, again, going back to that 7-year-old little girl where I wish I could have given my father those words. So we deliver words, books, everything to homeless people on the street, and if you join us, you'll be shocked at how many kids there are. Nobody knows that there's homeless kids living under bridges. And they say, well, can't you call CPS? Can't you call? They live there with their parents. They live under bridges and in shelters. That's a reality. So.
Wow. Wow. Well, that's very unique. And so can you tell me a success story that's come from that?
Absolutely. I can tell you one homeless guy who spends every Thanksgiving with us. We share a birthday, which is Thanksgiving. He'd be great to have on your show someday. Okay. So I met him on the street, and we were standing there, and we talked, and I asked him to go to lunch and took him to some baseball games, and you know, we started going to movies and hanging out, and now he's off the street, not homeless. It's been 4 years. He's on like his third car, meaning he's upgraded, you know, and I never, ever have given him money. Never in 4 years. Only words. So that's one example. Another example, which makes me sad because I went to his funeral, but I'll still count it as a success. Okay. I met a homeless man on the street, and we were serving others. So we were in a tent city in the woods. So there's all these homeless that live downtown in these tent cities. So we were in the woods in this tent city, pretty rough area where there's a bunch of tents, and we were with doctors that were helping bandage up this homeless guy. 9 a.m., guys drinking, you know, beer, sitting there. We're all in this tent city. And this guy talks to me, and he's dressed, he's a volunteer. I thought he was, like a doctor. And he says he's homeless, but he's dressed real nice, and he's helping. And his name was Dave Brungart. and we start talking, and I ended up bringing him home for dinner, and I said, well, let me help you write your resume. And he said he was a police chief. Well, I 100% believed him, right? Everybody else, no way, this guy's homeless. I Google him, there's his picture, there's a homeless guy. 8 years living on the floor at the homeless shelter. Not a drug addict, even though a lot of homeless get into drugs, but not a drug addict, not a drinker, okay? But stuck in a mortal wound, a police chief who got fired, and then his wife divorced him, and he had 2 little kids, and his wife took his kids, and he spiraled downward in depression to where he could not get off the floor of that homeless shelter.
Wow.
And I brought him home and talked to him, and by the time I met Dave, he was very angry and bitter. And anything I said, you know, you mentioned God to Dave, he would laugh in your face, you know. And he's very angry, very bitter. So I told him one day, he wanted to get a police chief job. And I said, Dave, I want you to recalibrate your life. I want you to wipe the slate clean, a blank canvas, and say, that old life is over. Because I knew the reality of him getting a police chief job, living on the floor of a homeless shelter was very remote. And I said, Dave, you're a new creation. I want you to start writing down your stories. Write down your stories. And what happened, Theresa, is his identity shifted from, I need to get back my past and what was lost. I said, that wasn't lost. That was not stolen from you. You still have that life. Now you just have to look at a new future. And so he started writing his stories and emailing them to me. The homeless shelter got him a computer. Every day he sat there among all the homeless people, and he started writing down his stories every day. And he sent them to me, and they were some of the most incredible, heartbreaking stories about being homeless. And what happened is he redefined himself as a writer, Now, Dave died on the floor of the Bridge homeless shelter, and everybody just said his heart gave out. But when I went to his funeral, I was able to connect and meet his sons who flew in. And I was able to sit and talk with them, and we're friends now. On Facebook, we keep in touch. And so it was remarkable. But that, I still say, is a success story because his heart shifted.
Yes, and you bring healing to so many, Tammy, and I just love it because you care for the less fortunate and give them the same expertise as you do your corporate and celebrity clients. And I just love that about you, Tammy. So we're coming to the end of the show, and I have a challenge for you.
Okay.
So I would like you to sum up in one word only, and capture the essence of Miss Tammy Kling.
Impactpreneur.
All right. And just briefly define that for us.
I don't just want to be an entrepreneur. I really want to make an impact on lives. And I want everyone to do the same thing. Even if you're inside an organization, or you work at a college, or you work at a corporation, or you work on your own, make an impact. Don't just make money. You know, try to make an impact and be an impactpreneur and say, what's my legacy?
Amen. I love that, Tammy. Thank you so much for coming and being with us. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, today's guest, Tammy Kling, has encouraged us to know the value of our words and has inspired us to spend our words wisely. Let's use our words to bring light, love, encouragement, hope, redemption through Jesus Christ, and peace into the world. God bless you.